Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm a member of Harvard Teacher Fellows Cohort 5, and I'm here today for another edition of HTF Live-ish with Katie Rieser, who is our Master Teacher in Residence for English, and also is the professor for T200, which is the first course that HTF Fellows take during the spring semester. So I'm really excited to have her here and ask her a few questions.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, everybody.
So without further ado, why did you join HTF?
I started my career as a 7th and 9th grade humanities teacher, and then I was the director of curriculum at a school for a while. And while I was teaching full-time, I started working with the Harvard Teacher Education Program as an adjunct, and I felt like it was this incredible way to sort of deepen my practice in the classroom, to be working with pre-service teachers in the summers and after school. And I kind of caught the bug and gradually began to do kind of more and more for the HTF programming, thanks to some of the faculty, Sarah Leibel in particular, who's the outgoing English faculty person before me. And I think the best moment of my increased work with HTF was when I started to do some work with the T200 course. And I think for me, the opportunity to sit in front of 30 Harvard undergraduates, all of whom want to be teachers, which is very much who I was 15 years ago, was so compelling. And the opportunity to sort of give them the tools and advice that, I felt like I had some of and could have had more of when I first entered the profession, was just really enticing. So when they offered me the full-time position, I took it.
Well, we're really happy that you did take it. Why do you think teaching English is important?
So people teach English for lots of different reasons. And I think my honest story with teaching English, I was an English major as an undergraduate, but I think part of why I was an English major is because I sort of felt like I was maybe good at English, or maybe wasn't good at other things, or I'm not, and I love to read. And I didn't consider myself to be a high-minded literature scholar, and I still don't. But I think at some point along my journey of starting to teach English, I realized that really kind of loving and caring about reading and writing was just sort of an important part of being a person in the world. And so sometimes I have English fellows who are really passionate about, Gothic era literature. And sometimes I have English fellows who are just like, I didn't have a content area I was passionate about, but I really want to teach students kind of basic skills. And I think English can really kind of help to bridge those worlds. There's a very content specific lens through which, understanding close reading, understanding and dissecting what a canon of English literature could be, asking questions about what makes a text good or bad, thinking about the sort of artistic elements of English are all really kind of important. But also, English teachers are kind of the very front lines of teaching, reading, writing, and discussion skills. And so really, I think for an English teacher, being able to build up those skills, which are so essential for every kind of cogent adult in the world, can be really meaningful. And I've seen teachers really kind of take the subject in both directions, which is really fun for me. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, with respect to reading, I think the coolest thing about teaching English is the opportunity to kind of introduce students to books as mirrors, reflections of themselves, and books as like windows, or, a window, for lack of a better word, into another world, which is always why, it's why I've read everything, many things, everything I get my hands on really my whole life. And I think it's why it's kind of what I hope to engender in the students that I work with.
Great. So you taught T200 this past spring semester with cohort 5. What was the most surprising or rewarding moment that you had teaching that course this semester?
I think, so I'll say two moments. There's always a moment I've done this now for a couple of years, taught T200 specifically. There's always a moment when, and I work closely with a TF, Rachel Jean-Louis, who is actually a former student of mine. I had her as a 10th grader many years ago. And so it's a really special opportunity to get back and teach with her. And the first few classes, I think we're always trying to get a read on who these cohorts are, who these people are, what's happening. It feels like things are coming together. We're asking really big, deep theoretical questions. You guys are engaging like Harvard students, but not necessarily like people or like future teachers yet. And then, we tend to hit a point, probably like class 3 or 4, where something clicks. And I don't necessarily think it clicks for Rachel and I, like we become excellent, but there's a moment where we leave class after usually the 3rd or 4th or 5th class, and we say, okay, like they're starting to get it, which means not that you're getting something that you didn't get before, but just that you're starting to kind of gel as a cohort and understand what might be special about entering this profession as an individual person. So that we definitely left class in the middle of, it was still very cold outside. And I remember like walking out of T200 and calling Rachel from the car because her sister would give her a ride home, and I would like bike to my car, and I had this crazy transportation thing trying to get back to Providence where I live. Anyway, so we would debrief in the car, and I remember calling her and saying like, this was the class. And she was like, this is the class. I'm really excited to keep working with these guys. So that was a moment. And then the other moment I think is just, it's always really special when a new cohort meets and gets to engage with young people for the first time. And so you guys did that a couple of times very early on. And then during the first teaching demo, about which everyone is incredibly nervous, walking in, seeing students, getting feedback from students, and remembering, oh my God, this is why I'm doing this. And the look on, fellows' faces when they were eating, their Subway sandwiches with 10th graders after that first demo lesson was, it's like, yeah, this is why you're doing this. This is good. It's important to bring that into the classroom.
Well, I learned so much in T200 this spring, so I know it was a great experience for all of us, including the students. Our last question is, how do you see distance learning and COVID-19 affecting K-12 education in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'll start with the positives. I think that through forced engagement with technology and distance learning, a massive number of teachers across the country and across the world are having the opportunity to learn about tools that they didn't have the impetus to begin learning about on their own necessarily, or the time, or feel like they had the motivation or whatever. I think some of those tools can be incredibly powerful. So that's one, I think, big positive. I think teachers always bring back their learning to their classrooms in whatever context. And I think there's exposure now, forced exposure, but exposure nonetheless to all sorts of things that people didn't necessarily have access to before. And I think the second big win potentially is that, there's so much inequity in schools in America and across the world, but breaking down the physical school walls allows for, not having physical school buildings allows for students to engage with people who are far away, potentially engage with people who are really different, allows teachers to engage with people who are far away and engage with people who are really different, and allows a pooling of resources across classrooms. So, allows students who are learning in Cambridge to be engaging closely with students who are learning in Providence in a way that maybe wasn't possible because of all the sort of physical constraints. And I think along with that, it's going to force people to imagine school as being really different. I think already my fellows who are in the classroom are saying, like, what is the point of this? What is the point of teaching? Why do I show up in a building every day? What is that accomplishing? And I think it accomplishes tons of things. Like, don't get me wrong, like I would always pick face-to-face instruction over virtual instruction. But I think my face-to-face instruction, along with that of my teachers, is going to get better because I'm forced to say, okay, what is being brought to the table in face-to-face instruction? And then, on my darkest days, I feel like, there's a huge amount of tragedy happening in the country. We're experiencing a collective national and world trauma. It's going to sit with some families and some kids and some students and some communities much longer than others. And, I think as a nation and perhaps as a world community, we don't do a good job of sticking with people who are still struggling after the fact. So, I have hope, because why else carry on? But like that maybe we'll learn some important lessons and be able to stick with folks who are struggling, and try to fix some of the inequities that existed before and will be deepened. But I think that's the piece that really worries me, and I think there's certainly a chance that a lot of stuff is going to get even more entrenched, and that makes me feel sad and want to, I don't know, push the students that I have to kind of be thinking about that as early as possible in their careers.
Yeah. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you. Thank you for your honest and insightful answers. That was a pleasure for me to listen to, and to learn something a little new. So yeah, it was great to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. It was fun to have a chance to chat on my first ever live news Facebook recorded event.
Live-ish news, yeah. Not exactly live, but.
Now do I say Katie Rieser over and out or something? No.
You're totally welcome.
I just waved.
You just did. Thank you.